What's up everybody, Kinetic here and welcome to The Division. This is probably the biggest and most impressive patch, I think, to date for this game. If you've been thinking maybe that the game's getting a bit stale, maybe even thought of quitting outright from playing The Division, you might want to hold that thought because this patch is packing a ton of stuff. Bug fixes, balancing, and loads of new content for not just PvP, but PvE as well. Loads of information has come out from the past few weeks worth of state of the game live streams. We've also recently had a trailer that was released for patch 1.2, which also dropped a few bombs of its own. And then last night, Thursday, there was another state of the game and also a special report that went into great detail about lots of things related to the biggest aspects of this coming patch. Now, if you haven't seen the trailer, I'm about to show it to you, and then once we're done with the trailer, we're going to talk about the things, of course, that were in that trailer. We're going to talk about the things in the state of the games before the trailer and the things in the special report. But first, let's go ahead and we'll take a look at that trailer for patch 1.2.
Agent, I am inbound on your position.
Following the retreat of the Last Man Battalion, other factions are taking over the city. In Columbus Circle, Rikers have seized one of the anti-aircraft sites abandoned by the LMB. Now they control the entire Manhattan airspace and are taking possession of our supply hubs. Take back the area.
This is your second incursion, Clear Sky. Find the best strategy to defeat an overwhelming force of Rikers and be rewarded with some of the finest loot. Conflict introduces more high-end weapons and top-of-the-line gear sets. Unlock them and try out new powerful effects to match your gameplay style. New enemy leaders are appearing all over Manhattan. Discover their whereabouts and hunt them down. Dark Zone extractions just became even more intense. Interrupt ongoing extractions by cutting the rope to have all the loot drop to the ground. Protect your loot at all cost. Get 3 major expansions and exclusive bonuses with the Season Pass.
So there you have it. There's the trailer for patch 1.2, and wow, what a trailer that was. I mean, some serious lids were blown when people saw that rope cutting feature was being added to the extraction points in the Dark Zone. It was hilarious to see the community's reaction to this, honestly. And so since we're already on that tone, let's go ahead and we'll start by talking about the rope cutting feature, the other Dark Zone changes and new content there. Then we'll get into the PvE content, talking about the new Incursion, talking about the high value targets or bounty hunting, as I like to call it, and all the cool PvE stuff there. And also there's even more after that to talk about, but let's go ahead and we'll start with the rope cutting stuff. So rope cutting or extraction hijacking, I'm not sure what the official name for it is, but most people, I think even the developers themselves, call it the rope cutting feature. This is not going to be as easy as the trailer makes it out to be. After the loot is placed onto the rope, and before the helicopter takes off, a person who of sinister ideas may have it that they want to go ahead and try and cut this rope. But as soon as they touch that rope, they will instantly be given a 20-second rogue status applied to them. And then it's going to take approximately 5 to 6 seconds to actually cut that rope. If they are successful, then they will then receive a level 1 90-second rogue timer. So you won't have to worry about going rogue in order to defend the loot that's on the rope. They will go ahead and be marked as rogue for you. So that eliminates one paranoia about this. The other thing is that there's actually a pushback feature. During the 5 or 6 second window when the rogue is trying to cut the rope, if they take damage from, for example, getting shot or anything like that, the progress bar is actually going to be pushed back and delayed, maybe even canceled completely from a certain amount of damage being applied to them while they cut the rope. So it's definitely possible and not that hard looking for the most part to interrupt and stop somebody from hijacking that loot. However, for demonstration purposes, they did show what would happen if the rogue was successful at cutting the rope. And this is what happens. Boom! It's like an exploding piñata of loot all over the ground. All the loot that was on that rope is now splashed all over the ground for anyone to be able to pick up then. I can only imagine the kind of crazy scenarios that would unfold if such a thing were to actually be successful with a significant number of people hanging around said rope. But for the most part, after having seen and heard about the reasoning for adding this feature and seeing that there is the pushback, that it's not an instant cut and things like that, it's looking like they've put a lot of consideration into both sides of how this can play out. As the person that wants to protect their loot and the person that wants to have a little bit more fun at the extraction point, it's looking pretty balanced so far. But they did say that they are going to closely monitor this new feature to make sure that any necessary adjustments will be applied sooner rather than later to make this more fair depending on how things unfold. There's no doubt in my mind that the community is going to think of ways to abuse this in some way that makes it extremely difficult, maybe even impossible for people to defend their loot. But again, that is why they're going to closely monitor this feature and make adjustments where necessary. But overall, I'm pretty excited for this. I think that it's going to make for some pretty epic moments and is going to add just a little bit, right? Not a lot, but just a little bit more tension to these situations. Get you hanging around just a few more seconds before you leave that extraction spot to ensure that your loot is safe and it is not being hijacked. All right, so let's move on. I think that's enough about the rope cutting feature for now. Let's talk about some other Dark Zone related things. One of the earliest things that they mentioned for patch 1.2 is the addition of a new gear score bracket that is going to help spread out the super geared people from the not so super geared people and to create a more even and balanced playing field for the Dark Zone. So for gear score, I believe it's 162 to 200. They are going to be their own gear score bracket, and anybody that's 201 and above is going to have now their own gear score bracket. And you may be thinking, well, these gear scores are completely pointless. It doesn't really do anything to separate the players because it's not hard to trick the system and going into a lower bracket than you're supposed to be with really powerful stuff and da-da-da-da-da-da. You're right, and I totally agree with you, absolutely 100%, that this is not a foolproof method of separating the super geared players from the people that are not super geared. But they did create incentive. Actually, this is going to kind of start me talking into how loot has been improved overall here in this patch. What they started in patch 1.1, they're really coming to a nice, well-rounded system now for improving the quality and quantity of loot that is being dropped in all aspects. Not just the Dark Zone, but all aspects pretty much of the Division is seeing a buff to the quantity and quality of loot across the board. But back to the Dark Zone bracket, right? And incentive. They're creating the incentive that if you are participating in gear score 201 and above, you will see the best weapons, you will see the most powerful high-end and gear set armor also available in this new gear score bracket, as well as Division tech that will only be high-end quality. No green, no blue crap. Only high-end Division tech will be found in this new Dark Zone bracket. And so this incentive-based design for the Dark Zone, I think, is probably going to be the most powerful and effective means of making sure that, for the most part, players are in the correct bracket that they are supposed to be in, because why waste your time unless you're just an uber troll that likes nothing more than taking the roughly gear score 210 set that you have and then dropping yourself down a few more points to be able to troll people in the lower bracket. It's gonna happen, right? I'm not saying that's not gonna happen, but they're really gonna be wasting their time when they could be farming even more powerful guns, even more powerful high-end pieces, Division tech, gear sets. Like I said, all gear sets, all of them, not just Path of the Nomad, is going to drop in the Dark Zone now. So I would prioritize. If I were a rogue, a sensible rogue, right, I would be prioritizing myself in the highest bracket that I could be in to get the best loot. But don't think they didn't consider the lower gear score brackets as well and how to improve them. They've also created a more balanced system from the different levels that you are in the Dark Zone. There's 6 levels, right? 1 to 6, and you'll find the weaker enemies from, Dark Zone 1, then increasing in difficulty, and also the quality of loot, right? In the Dark Zone levels. Well, they're making it even better that depending on which zone that you are in the Dark Zone, you will see harder enemies and you will also see better loot, and that goes for all gear score brackets. So for people that are still stuck in the middle ground in the 162 I suppose to 200 gear score bracket, you'll be seeing a lot more 183 I guess weapons probably dropping there. Same for gear set pieces. I think there's even a chance at obtaining up to 214 gear score armor and gear score gear sets that can be dropped in the mid bracket as well. So overall, some really nice polish, a new bracket that helps to spread the right gear scored players out and create a good incentive to make sure that people are going to want to be in the highest gear score bracket. Really nice changes to the Dark Zone. But it doesn't stop there. Also, one of the big bombs that they just recently dropped about Dark Zone updates. You know how it's kind of annoying to go all the way back to base of operations to have access to your stash box? Oh yeah, that's right. They're putting the stash box at the checkpoints. You will no longer have to go all the way back to the base of operations to gain access to your extracted loot and to your stash box and all the gear and stuff in general that's there. All you got to do is just go to the nearest checkpoint. There was some confusion, I think, as far as whether they would be available in the safe houses in the Dark Zone. I don't think that they are by the sound of it. They will just be at the checkpoints. But hey, that is good enough for me, man, and is going to help keep the momentum really, really well now for Dark Zone farming. And while you're also checking your stash box, you might want to check out these new sealed caches as well. Yes, these essentially treasure boxes that now are going to be dropping of various quality, depending on the gear score bracket that you're in, from, I suppose, superior to high end, and then up to gear set quality. Sealed caches can be found from any enemy in the Dark Zone. The high end in the gear set sealed caches, I believe they said, would only drop from the named bosses. I don't know what the percentage chance is that these boxes will be dropping. I don't know if it's 100%. I don't know if it's less than that. But once you get these sealed caches in your container, and this is going to have to be extracted, by the way, these sealed caches, because they are corrupted or contaminated, I should say, after all, right? You're going to have to extract them, and then you'll send them back to your stash box. Go to your stash box, and you'll find these babies inside, and these are looking really sweet, man. There's some good loot inside of here, and there's also Division Tech, and there's also Dark Zone credits. These are very nice looking little happy packages that you can extract from the Dark Zone. And I think that pretty much covers all of the big announcements, the major updates and changes to the Dark Zone, which is looking really sweet. But now I'm very happy to talk about the PvE updates. So let's start by talking about the search and destroy missions and the high value targets. I like to kind of wrap this up into one package and call it the Bounty Hunter update for patch 1.2. Once you've cleared out a zone in New York, let's say Hell's Kitchen, for example, you've cleared out the side missions and you've cleared out the encounters. This is not counting the collectibles, right? Like the crash drones or anything like that, but just the encounters and the side missions. Once you've cleared those out, the mission board inside of the safe house in that zone of New York is now going to have search and destroy missions. And these are more or less another form of encounters that you can take on. These will be randomly generated encounters that you can go to, and then once you've cleared out the enemies in the search and destroy missions, you will obtain a new point or currency that is called target intel. And then you can take that target intel and then go back to base of operations. And with your target intel points, you can exchange that for access to high value target missions. And this is where the real challenge and bounty hunting begins, because you will get to choose from a selection of targets that are to be eliminated. And upon completion of these high-value target missions, you will be rewarded with a number of things, including Phoenix credits and some very appropriate loot for the difficulty of that bounty hunt. These will come in both a daily and weekly format. Something else to be noted about the Search and Destroy missions is that there will be critical versions of these encounters. So the critical Search and Destroy missions have a certain urgency that if you go and complete them first, instead of maybe just staying in one zone and repeating Search and Destroy missions there, by going to the critical ones in other places in New York, you'll actually gain bonus target intel, which of course is going to help you build up your stack, right, to be able to take on more high value target bounty hunts sooner rather than later. So again, just to kind of summarize this, these are kind of isolated within the certain zones around New York, not in the dark zone, but outside of the dark zone, right? You will need to clear out the encounters and clear out the side missions within that zone. And then within the safe house, you'll have access to the Search and Destroy missions at the mission board, which you can then go clear those out, get the target intel, and then back at base of operations, use that target intel to take on high value target missions. Go out there, go kick their ass, and then collect some sweet loot. Massive have pointed out that this is not necessarily only a top level feature. This is something that players that are leveling their characters and that are not max level yet will be able to gain access to these Search and Destroy missions and high value targets, as long as, of course, like I said, they complete all of the encounters and side missions within that zone, and then they'll have access to that, which is pretty sweet. But of course, there are max level versions of the Search and Destroy and high value target missions that even if you're level 30, you may be facing so much pressure that you might need to form up a party in order to successfully complete these encounters. Which actually brings me to something else that I want to make sure that I mention about these high value target missions. If you fail them, in other words, let's say you throw yourself recklessly at one of these badass bosses and he destroys you, then you failed that mission, and in order to try it again, you will have to pay the target intel again to gain access to this mission. So it's not something that you necessarily want to throw yourself at recklessly. You might want to go in with just a little bit of caution, even if you are very well geared, because these are designed to be challenging, appropriate to the level and the gear that you are. I'm really itching to get into talking about the new Incursion Clear Sky, which is looking to be a very different kind of incursion. If you were a little bit fearful that they may repeat the same one-room horde mode kind of incursion, don't worry. It's not looking like that's what Clear Sky is going to be about. It's going to be a very different encounter, and I'll get into that. But before we do, I want to talk about the updates that they're also making to the main missions and the first incursion, Falcon Lost, because like I said, they're making adjustments and improvements to the quantity and quality of loot in just about every aspect of the division right now. And there's really some fine details that I could go into here, but let me just kind of put it simply that for main missions and for incursions in general, you're going to see much more generous loot coming out of these missions and the incursions for hard and for challenge mode. If you want to know the exact details as far as how it ranks for hard and challenge and the daily and weekly rewards for these missions, then I highly recommend that you go check out the blog post that's been made on the official site, and it will break down for you what you can expect from hard, challenging, etc. like that. But just trust me, they've made it much better than it currently is. All right, so let's talk about Clear Sky. They had a really nice, lengthy demonstration. They didn't show the entire incursion, of course, because they want to obviously leave some surprises for when people actually try to take these on. But from what we saw, it's actually looking really sweet. For one, I love the fact that it's an outdoor incursion. This is going to be based around the Rikers group, not the LMB. But it is kind of related to the LMB in that because of the shattering, for now, of the LMB forces, the Rikers have picked up their efforts to try and gain power. So they've gained access to anti-air missile defenses, for example, that are now harassing supply lines for the good people of New York in Manhattan. That's kind of the lore and the or story behind what's going on here. But what this basically means for our mission is essentially that we need to raid their compound and we need to find a way to get in there and take control of these anti-air defenses so that way we can have our supply lines safe and sound. As far as gear score goes and what are the recommended and requirements for Clear Sky, it's basically the same as Falcon Lost. There was some paranoia as far as what they were going to do. Are they going to make us need even higher gear score for recommended on hard and required for a challenge? No, that's not the case. So it's going to be the same recommended and requirements depending on hard or challenge. So if you're taking on challenge right now in Falcon Lost, then hard for Clear Sky is going to be probably relatively easy, and then your challenge will be waiting for you in the actual challenge mode. So all things considered, right, the updates to the quality and quantity of loot from main missions, from the incursions also getting buffed, and now we have lots of loot that's going to be delivered to us thanks to the high value target missions, aka bounty hunting missions as I like to call them. This essentially means, and I think I'm almost quoting the guys at Massive, that this update is going to mean that PvE players who just want to PvE will no longer need or have any pressure to perform in the Dark Zone anymore, because all of basically the equivalent rewards that Dark Zone players are getting over there is going to be available to them in the main missions, incursions, and high-value target missions now. The only remaining question for me personally, as far as PvE and PvP balancing, is about the blueprints, because obviously that's the main incentive right now existing in this current patch for players to be in the Dark Zone is to get access to those blueprints. I have no idea. I don't think they've made any mention as far as whether they're rotating those blueprints into the base of operations as well. If they don't, then what I just said about there not being a reason to go into the Dark Zone isn't entirely true. But even still, unless you're looking for a very specific weapon and you must have the best possible role that you can gain access to for that weapon, you don't necessarily need the blueprints. You can get the same weapons, the same gear score tier, and the same talents with a little bit of luck from PvE main missions, incursions, and high-value target missions. Alright, so I'm talking a lot about how they've been buffing the quality and quantity of weapons and gear sets and stuff like that, but I haven't actually talked about the new weapons and the new gear sets that they are bringing into patch 1.2. There are 4 new weapons and there are 4 new gear sets that are going to be available come this patch. The new weapons are the M60 LMG, the M19 pistol, the SAS G12 shotgun, and the Historian M1A MMR. This is the same Historian that we've heard about for quite some time. It was partially, if that makes any sense, partially implemented in patch 1.1 and is going to be fully implemented here in patch 1.2. So hooray, new weapons. I have no idea how we're going to get them. I am guessing that they're going to be dropping from incursions, for example, and maybe from supply boxes, or maybe from bosses in the Dark Zone. There's going to be a number of ways, I'm sure, that these weapons can be obtainable. And the new gear sets include Final Measure, Hunter's Faith, Predator's Mark, and the Lone Star. Final Measure's 2-piece set bonus is going to have plus 50% to exotic damage resilience, which is really going to help out with things like anything explosive related, sticky bombs, grenades, that kind of thing. 3-piece set bonus plus 15% protection from elites, and the talent 4-piece bonus Final Measure. When damaging a hostile with a grenade, gain the defuse buff. So when you damage somebody throwing a grenade, you'll gain the defuse buff. When in range of a hostile grenade, the buff is consumed and diffuses the grenade as well as gives you a grenade. So in other words, you're going to get a buff from damaging enemies with a grenade, and then this buff will be consumed. If a grenade is thrown at you, you will defuse that grenade and it will be added to your inventory, which is a pretty neat idea for a gear set, I think. I can't see how many situations this set would actually be valuable in a PvP setting, but for PvE incursions, definitely. I mean, Falcon Lost is a great example of where this set can shine and protect you from explosive damage. Hunter's Faith 2-piece set bonus is plus 20% marksman rifle critical hit damage. So already right out the gates we can see that this is very much a sniper set. The 3-piece bonus plus 20% damage to elites, which is pretty nice, and the 4-piece bonus talent Hunter's Faith. Hitting an enemy with a bullet grants you temporary armor. The further you're shot, the more armor. The armor disappears after one bullet hits you. So basically, once you hit an enemy with your sniper shot, you will essentially gain a shield. And this shield can give you an armor mitigation bonus above the cap, which also, I guess I'll go ahead and say this. I was going to save it for later. Armor mitigation is getting a buff from 65%, which is the current cap, to 75%, a 10% increase in armor mitigation. And this Hunter's Faith bonus can actually give you an armor mitigation value above that. This set, more than any other so far, screams glass cannon to me. I mean, I think that that's where they were kind of going with this design. You can basically get survivability out of dealing out damage, which I think is also a really interesting concept. For the Lone Star set, we have a 2-piece bonus of plus 100% ammo capacity. The 3-piece bonus, plus 1000 LMG damage and plus 1000 shotgun damage. So we can already see what kind of guns they have in mind for you to equip for these sets. By the way, none of these sets have any restrictions, I don't think. Unlike the update to the Sentry set, which I believe is being restricted only to semi-auto guns for that. You can, I believe they said, equip any guns you want with these builds, but obviously it would behoove you to equip the right guns, for example, an LMG or a shotgun, for example, with the Lone Star set. And the 4-piece bonus Lone Star, when the weapon is holstered, it regains full ammo, which isn't the best way to word this because I think that can get a little bit confusing, but basically, when you switch weapons, which is holstering your current weapon, right, then your clip is going to be refilled. So in other words, if you blow out your load with your shotgun and you completely go empty, instead of waiting for all that time it takes to put new shells into the shotgun, just switch weapons, and then you've basically just reloaded your gun. That's how this works. So you can keep switching back and forth without, I mean, theoretically, ever having to reload your gun just by switching your weapon, which I think is really, really sweet. Fourth and finally, we have the Predator's Mark. 2-piece bonus, plus 20% optimal range. 3-piece bonus, plus 800 assault rifle damage, and plus 700 pistol damage. Now, if we compare the damage buffs here with this set compared to the Lone Star vest, I think that they're already starting to kind of balance out weapon damage with the weapons with these sets. I mean, it's no secret that LMGs and shotguns are like second-class weapons practically right now in the division with their damage potential, but I think that right now with these sets, these can start to kind of help with that issue with weapon damage between the various guns. They also mentioned that they are looking into doing some weapon balancing. They didn't go into details as far as whether that meant nerfs for some guns and buffs for other guns specifically, but they did say that they are looking into doing some weapon balancing, and we will find out more about that not long after patch 1.2 comes out. It's not going to be in this patch, but it may come in the weeks to follow soon after the patch. I went off on a really long tangent. Let's get back to the Predator's Mark. Hit 10 shots without switching targets to make the target bleed for 100% damage already done by those bullets. So let's just go ahead and assume that you're using your assault rifle for this set. With the Predator's Mark, 10 headshots, boom, they are now going to bleed for 100% of that damage dealt. And the idea here is that it's going to help to continuously deal damage to enemies that are hiding from you or maybe even running away from you or something like that in mind. Out of the 4 new sets that we're seeing for patch 1.2, I think that the Predator's Mark set is definitely the most balanced. It's the most viable for both PvE and PvP kind of scenarios, unlike, for example, the Final Measure, which, like I said, I think is very much a PvE style of gear set. This one is much more balanced. Whether it's actually better than, for example, the Strikers set. Still remains to be investigated, but I think that they've more or less unofficially made the Strikers set to be the SMG set without actually putting bonus SMG damage into the set, because, of course, SMGs really don't need bonus damage now, do they? But certainly assault rifles do, shotguns do, LMGs do, and I think some nice tuning for marksmen is not a bad idea either, which is why we're seeing pretty much buffs to every other gun except for SMGs in these sets. We are now rounding the final corner for this essential info video for patch 1.2, since I've already talked about the damage mitigation buff, which is going from 65% to 75%. We've already covered that. Just a couple more things. The cap to Phoenix credits is being increased from 1,000 to 2,000. And you can also look forward to seeing your health points replaced in the character screen with a new toughness value. You may already have noticed this from the previous screens. Toughness is now a measurement of both your stamina and also your armor mitigation. This is a much more meaningful way to display your character's overall survivability and defense now here in the Division. And that's it. That, I think, is enough rambling from me. Like I said, you can find even more details in the description of this video. I have links to the official posts on the Division websites where they go into even more gross detail about what's coming up in patch 1.2. And if that wasn't enough for you, coming up on Monday, like I said, we are going to see the patch notes released the day before. May 24th, this Tuesday, is going to be the release of patch 1.2. And I'm not just saying this to get you hyped to look forward to seeing more videos from me in the Division. I'm honestly saying I'm super excited for this patch. This is a big game changer. These are the kinds of changes that, for example, took Blizzard Entertainment years to implement in, for example, Diablo 3. We didn't see major overhauls to that game until 2 years later with the expansion Reaper of Souls. But already here we are in the first few months of release for the Division, and we're already basically seeing a Loot 2.0. Gear sets, we have bounties, basically, right? The high value targets, and so much more being added to the Division. And this doesn't even count the actual season pass content, the real expansions that are coming up in the months right after this patch. It's a really exciting game, to say the least, as far as looking into the future. And I'm so proud of seeing this team put together this patch. It's not perfect. There's still a lot to be done. We still need better detection and measures taken against cheaters. We still need stash space increased, which, by the way, they said they are working on this. And we can probably expect to see that in the next update. Unfortunately, not yet, because it's not as easy as simply adding another 0, like they said, to your stash-based numbers. No, it comes at the cost of the server traffic and data flow and stuff like that. So they want to make sure that they fix this properly, so that way they don't end up breaking 10 other things. So respect to them for that. And there's a lot more, definitely, that still needs to be looked at. But when I look at this patch and I look at the patch 1.1 that we just had, these two patches have done amazing things for the game. And I'm really, really happy to be sticking around and able to deliver this info and my enthusiasm for it, and able to express my enthusiasm for it here in these videos. I hope that you enjoyed it. I want to know what your thoughts are now down in the comment section below. Tell me what you think, guys. What do you think about patch 1.2? What are the most exciting things that are being brought to the table with this patch? What things maybe are you still looking forward to them making adjustments to? Click the like button to support these Division videos here on my channel, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next update. Thanks again for watching. My name is Kinetic, and I'll see you next time.